I have seen basically every one of our competitors post jobs with my title and our department title since we built out this team because it has been so successful.
Chris, what's up, man? How are you doing today?
Sam, I'm doing great today. How about yourself?
I am good and very, very excited for our guest today. This is a very special episode. I think there were some really incredible takeaways. Sara El-Amine, she is the head of community engagement at Lyft. I'm sure most of you have all used Lyft, or at the very least are very familiar with Lyft, but they have been able to undergo some truly massive international growth since their inception. And I think a major piece of that is the fact that they've always had local community engagement at the core of their approach. And that's how they've been able to grow and thrive, not only from a marketing and customer acquisition standpoint, but even from having community engagement at the core of how they improve and iterate upon the product. So I think Sara really spearheads a lot of these efforts, and it's a testament to her tactics as Lyft's growth. And I think she does a fantastic job in distilling them down into ways in which you can leverage some of these same mechanisms to drive growth for your companies. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, Sara really brought some interesting perspectives to the table. I love her background. She has a lot of experience in public policy. And going over to Lyft is obviously, one of the things that she's trying to do is leverage community as a problem-solving mechanism. So, how do you prevent policy from becoming a huge barrier to growth and communicate that effectively? Lyft became an essential service overnight once the pandemic hit. So they've been doing a lot of really great work in terms of, helping organize community around, social good initiatives as well. So really excited for everybody to hear this, and let's dive on in.
Sara, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, definitely. I think really excited to dive into a lot of fun topics today. For starters, as head of community engagement at Lyft, can you just kind of dive a little bit into what the day-to-day looks like and what the objective of the community engagement function is at Lyft?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, in the marketing world at large, there's been this really fascinating transition away from your, not to disparage your average marketing person, but from folks who have sort of just one linear set of experiences in marketing or engagement towards people who really reflect the communities that you're trying to serve and trying to engage in really different ways. So Lyft has always put community at the center of our mission, at the center of our product, drivers being from communities, picking up, fellow neighbors and helping them get where they need to go is a really inspiring, amazing model. So the founders at Lyft a couple years ago decided to expand the community function and brought me on to really help us engage drivers at scale, engage passengers at scale, and then most interestingly, I think, engage kind of local nonprofit organizations, whether it's through our social impact work or through some of the policy work that we do, or through listening and charitable giving. We do kind of full suite engagement of three of the groups that matter to us most as a company.
That's amazing. So when it comes to definition of success, and how are you defining it? Because I know kind of community engagement can be this broad thing, even though intuitively we all know there is a very direct tie to things like business growth. But on a more quantifiable level, what are some of the elements that you're really looking to drive and kind of success indicators you're after?
Yeah, I think you're right. The North Star is always going to be business growth, and then underneath that, favorability. Right. So we track all those different things. But I'd also say, you don't just want favorability among everyone in a milquetoast way. You want really strong intensity of favorability amongst your most important customers, advocates, even you want to neutralize your opponents. And so to me, when I look at the layer of data underneath favorability, it's who likes us right now, who doesn't like us, why don't they like us, and does that map back to how we want to grow? And one thing we're seeing at Lyft, which won't be surprising to folks, is that communities of color are a really important growing dynamic in this country. politically. They're an important growing dynamic economically. And so unless, frankly, many different companies, all companies are really able to center communities of color, engage them authentically, and engage them with people of color driving that engagement, I think we really miss an opportunity to build a product that, serves the communities we're trying to grow within.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's no surprise that COVID-19 has obviously been a huge impact on a lot of different various businesses, some good, some bad. But I guess I'm curious to hear, from pre-COVID to, now, like the times that we're in, how have your community initiatives changed, whether that's with drivers or riders, et cetera? What are some of the ways that you found that you've had to modify your approach or, dig a little deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I mean, we dropped absolutely everything in March when COVID hit and the lockdown started. And that wasn't just because, our platform fundamentally changed. The way people used our platform fundamentally changed. We became an essential service overnight in a very different marketplace than we'd operated in before. And all of a sudden, people had delivery needs. There were seniors across the country who couldn't go out grocery shopping. There were lower income families who couldn't access food banks that they'd been accessing and getting to, on the day to day before that. And people lost jobs. So that universe of folks in need grew exponentially, really, honestly, in a matter of just a couple of weeks. So we dropped everything. We set up a very scrappy manual delivery program where we've been able to deliver millions of meals pro bono, and medical supplies and all sorts of other groceries, interesting, different products that really aren't a part of our main platform. My team helped drive and expand that effort. It was really inspiring and moving to be of service in that way. And then, on the heels of that, racial justice issues exploded in this country with the murder of George Floyd and several others. And we had already been really, I think, at the front lines locally, because we have all these local community staff who are based in Chicago, from Chicago, a part of the Chicago organizing infrastructure already, who had already been activating and had already been engaging in racial justice issues, but the intensity and the scope of that engagement really expanded. And so we partnered with across the country, we partner with local nonprofits. And we didn't just, do what I think a lot of companies do, which is throw money at the problem and make big grants. We actually sat down with them and said, we have a pre-existing relationship with you. We've been working with you for years in some instances already. What does the shape of your need actually look like? And we don't have tons of money at this moment as a transportation company during a pandemic where year over year rideshare is down, something like 50%. So we can donate rides. How might that help in addition to maybe some cash capital? And we had really inspiring, amazing conversations and have built some epic programs as a result of, both of those dynamics, COVID and racial justice, neither of which are good things to have to manage for a company or for the world, But what I will say is the key takeaway I have is that having local staff on the ground ahead of when crises hit is absolutely crucial, because national responses, and you guys know this in the marketing world, don't mean anything. There is almost no such thing, despite what Joe Biden says, as one nation anymore. We are many different separate communities who require many different separate treatments, at the same time, while staying true to a product or company's values. And I'm really proud of how we've been able to build a dynamic response.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So, and that brings up, some commentary on your background, which is obviously like very much tied to the public sector, and obviously some really impressive work with UN and Obama for America and the DNC, et cetera. How have you found that, the work that you were doing in the public sector has translated to, what you're doing now for Lyft, and, how have you galvanized community, in both of those capacities? Either, yeah.
Great question. I mean, I had no idea that I would end up at a company like Lyft or even in the private sector ever. So you're as surprised as I am. But I will say what was fascinating for me is I am a community organizer. I will always be a community organizer. and community organizers were trained to look at a problem that you're trying to solve and basically just like try every single lever possible to solve that problem. So maybe it's federal legislation, maybe it's local, pushing local legislation, maybe it's doing corporate advocacy, maybe it's, doing community service and advocacy that way. There's lots of different ways to sort of skin a cat. And for me, when I think about economic mobility and stability in this country, and when I think about the organizing challenges that are ahead for, workers who want a living wage, there's no more inspiring place to be as a community organizer than in a company that wants to try to change what the, economic model looks like for folks who, their one job right now isn't enough, and minimum wage basic work isn't enough. They're able to do these side gigs that really fundamentally change the shape of their family's prospects. And so it's been really inspiring for me to work on this. At the same time, when you look at marketing and engagement, public engagement in Silicon Valley, the barrier to profitability for a lot of these companies is no longer, how do we scale our product? How do we make it sexy for people? Sort of in your more classic, maybe marketing manner. It's how do we prevent policy from being a huge ongoing barrier to our growth. And having worked, in DC with a lot of elected officials, they have no idea how to regulate tech, and are regulating totally different problems than people are actually really experiencing. So for me, I am excited to encourage more community organizers and people with political background to join the public engagement, marketing, policy departments in the tech world, because I think it's what our country needs. I think it's also what these companies need in order to really continue to grow and to mitigate the biggest barrier to that growth, which is a new one and not one that a lot of more traditional marketers, I think, are prepared to address and tackle.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting crossover and fascinating point. Excited to see how that landscape continues to evolve in the coming years. With that said, when you think about like team structure on your side and pulling on all your experience from both public and work you've been doing at Lyft and helping manage and grow the team, how do you organize and deploy like the team? I mean, Lyft is obviously a massive organization at this point, and I mean the community is also massive and thriving. And you even mentioned the kind of subsegments of the community as a whole. From a team and internal standpoint, how are you organizing your community engagement team to trigger community engagement?
Yeah, well, it all starts and ends honestly with that market-based model. So we are lucky and blessed to have a president and CEO who really believe in this model and are willing to invest in local staff that drive local strategies, underneath an umbrella of a sort of company-wide set of principles and goals. So that's the first thing. We have, 22 staff now who are sort of in charge. They are the sole owners of separate, each of their own markets, the key markets for our company, and the key markets that might be, the biggest markets. And we work in lockstep. I'm not formally a part of the marketing org. It's separate. I'm formally part of the policy org, but I work incredibly closely with marketing. I work incredibly closely with communications. And I'm really proud of how much we've let our local leaders tell us what to do. Instead of the opposite. And I think there's a real, when you look at some of our competitors, when you look at Uber, even as an example, they have not even a fraction of the staff that we have locally. And I think you can tell in the way that their product evolves and the way that, they're able to talk about their engagement locally and their brand. We have a real edge in that way. And it's one we're excited to continue.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Uber and how you guys compare. And this could be applied to any company or business. But aside from Lyft, what other companies do you look at who you think are doing a great job of galvanizing community and deploying the framework there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Airbnb is one that I think of often, and we have a few staff that have come from Airbnb. They hired, really, it somewhat stems the model that we're using, unsurprisingly, from the Obama national team or neighborhood team leader model, where you have many different segmented local leaders who are all kind of given broad marching orders, but able to drive and develop strategies that fit for their own communities. And the Airbnb team hired a bunch of Obama organizers quite early, a lot of my friends, frankly. And they built this local organizing model and local engagement model that allowed Airbnb hosts to build community with each other, improve the product by giving feedback up to headquarters instead of sort of disparaging the product sideways or to random, online forums. And I was really inspired on the sidelines when I was still working in product in the political world by that model. And so when a mentor of mine called me to talk about this Lyft job, I was working in philanthropy, working on economic mobility and stability as one part of my portfolio. And it just felt like such a fit. But I will say, I have seen basically every one of our competitors post jobs with my title and our department title since we built out this team, because it has been so successful. And so, I had a leader from a competing organization tell me they were just copying our org chart.
Wow.
Like baldly, right? Which I was like, great. My broader goal isn't just for Lyft to be, the rideshare platform of choice. It's for communities to be engaged in the development of products in a way that makes the product better and the community more satisfied. And doesn't have to just stop at the boundaries of where our company, begins and ends.
I love that personal mission that you have. I think it's super valuable. And I think the more companies we see that really embrace that DNA from the onset, the more successful companies and customers and organizations and the people they serve will have. So I guess the one last thing as we come to a close here, we have a question we always ask. It will put you on the hot seat a little bit. But if you were to start a new direct-to-consumer product or software company from scratch, what would it be, and how would you deploy a $100K marketing budget to jumpstart growth?
Oh man. The first thing I thought of was cheese, because I'm a big fan of artisanal cheese. And so I would start a cheese. This might already exist, so I don't know.
You can do it better,
I would
Sarah.
start a cheese gift basket where you could take lots of different fancy cheeses and package them up and send a cheesy care package to your dearly beloved friends and family and neighbors. I would spend $100K on, I'm gonna pass on that part. I would spend $100K on community members doing community marketing with cheesy people.
The good thing is there's a huge market for that. Everybody loves cheese.
Indeed. Well, that is fantastic.
I listened to the podcast ahead of time, so I was ready for that question.
Yeah.
I am pre-coffee, gang. It's 8:30.
Oh man, well, really appreciate you coming on. I think all the work you continue to do is super empowering, and excited to see where it continues to go. So thanks for taking the time to share some tactics with us.
Thanks for the work you guys do. Really appreciate it, and it was really fun to chat.
Likewise, Sarah. We'll talk soon. Damn, well, your boy really wants some nicely fine aged Parmesan cheese right about now.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that episode with Sarah. It did get a little bit cheesy at the end, so we're just going to keep that streak going right now with jokes like that. And I think what I really enjoyed was her kind of ethos as far as just wanting to have community be at the forefront of serving customers and stakeholders and using that to inform product roadmap decisions. I think it's not just this marketing customer acquisition play. I think it very much is, how can we create value for the people we're serving, and how can we leverage engagement as a mechanism to not only reach new people, but to improve the value we're providing. What stood out to you, Chris?
Yeah, just kind of piggyback on that. I think that the way that they were effectively partnering with local nonprofits was really interesting. Asking them what their needs were and really partnering with them on a very focused level. So I thought that was great. And then also, I loved asking her about what companies or what company she thought was doing a really good job with community. And she reflected on Airbnb and all the great stuff that they're doing there. And one of the big takeaways that I thought was most interesting, I think, is the fact that a lot of companies are actually like replicating Lyft's community, internal infrastructure as well. So a lot of stuff that everybody can take away from this call, from this chat. And yeah, it was good stuff.
Well, there you have it. Thank you as always for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Appreciate you. Cheers.